Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was transported into Black Clover world? Part 1. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and also make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, Dicktock McJerry, and support him for writing this awesome fanfic. Link is in the description. Let's start the story. It was there, at the precipice war, that he truly became enlightened to the face of tragedy. The death of his teacher wounded him. The death of his brother crippled him. The death of his beloved killed him. With his mind drowned in oceans of grief, the light at the surface of that dreadful water erased his past reticence and steeled his resolve. With the goddess dead, the teen was content to stay submerged in this sea of mourning and let the water camouflage his tears. Sadly, he felt a tug at the back of his mind, disrupting the current he had already surrendered to. The tug became a pull, and he was ripped from one dimension to another. The shift of realities left him unfazed, and he chose instead to focus on the disappearing seals on the ground. If his senses hadn't left him, he would have heard the triumphant cries of the beasts that surrounded him, wither into a diseased silence at the sight of the bodies beside him. He would have heard Kurama lightly call his name. He would have seen his father look on in agony at the fate that had befallen his student. But he knew that if he took those senses back, he would be forced to look at the corpses of his team. The sensei that raised him cleaved in half. The brother he respected charred too crisp with his eye sockets empty. The woman he loved with a hole in her heart. Team 7 had killed a god. And that god had killed Team 7. It was truly a fate worse than death, one that, in their earlier days of coexisting, his inhabitant demon would plague him with nightmares of. A fate that could have been avoided. A fate that would never be again. Thus, he buried his naivety, and set a new plan into motion. The demons agreed to be sealed inside of himself on the basis of mutual trust. That Tsukiyomi was undone, and human ability to use chakra was no more. The erasure of the energy would have a cataclysmic societal impact, but leaving something with such devastating destructive power in the hands of those who would do others harm seemed irresponsible. It simply wasn't something that belonged in this world, a relic that would be lost to myth. Generations would come without ever having experienced it, and soon it would disappear from even discussion. Having accomplished his plan, the boy found a cave for himself to reside, and let himself fall into a year-long journey of reflection. 4,000 years later, it was 3 years ago that Naruto had risen from his meditation. His introspective musings over the eons had mutated into a desire to finally experience the world. The ashes of immortality fell away after an excursion to the surface, and while withholding his status as an eternal being, joined the ranks of a dilapidated local church. From there he had learned the ways of the new world. The new language wasn't challenging to learn with a healthy amount of study and practice, but it did leave him with a thick accent, branding him a foreigner for the first year and a half of his new life. By the time the accent had fallen from his cadence, and he had integrated into the population, a few national headaches began troubling him. The rise of magic power was worrying, but from his experiences, it had a far less destructive capacity than chakra did, and had become so ingrained in the everyday lives of the population, that attempting to phase it out could return catastrophic results. In a very liberal estimate, roughly a third of the world 4 millennia ago could use chakra. In the present, however, there were only 2 people alive that couldn't use magic power. Himself, and a boy who the church had taken in some odd 15 years ago. What concerned him more than the presence of magic was the aristocracy that it upheld. The nobles were those with the most magic power, who married those with equal amounts, and bore children ripe with potential to surpass their parents. The New World had incidentally created a culture where selective breeding was normalized, and discrimination was a societal staple. That corruption gave him a goal, though. To rid the world of these injustices, and spread equality. Far easier said than done. Realistically, he surmised it would take multiple generations, and a complete reconstruction of the ruling classes, to erase the stigma that surrounded the common folk. He heard that the nobles residing in the capital were quite stubborn regarding acknowledgement of peasant-born power. However, the completion of these plans was far from the present. He was sure that he could simply fly over to the royal capital at any moment, and take control from the current rulers, but a kingdom ruled by fear was a kingdom doomed to fail. So, he threw that off the table, electing to work his way up the ranks himself, and bring peace from within. Here he found himself, the night before his departure to the royal capital, reclined in a pew, and staring at the dancing of a fire, as it teased the logs in the fireplace. Sleep was pleasant to somebody with his healing capability, and he rarely found himself partaking anymore. None in the convent knew of his self-induced insomnia. They had all assumed that he was late to bed, and early to rise, and it wasn't until the resident nun had awoken late one night, and found him in the rows of the church, flipping pages of what she assumed was his grimoire, that he had told her of his troubles with sleep. From there, Lily had begun to make it a point to keep him company for an hour or so once or twice a week. She could never stay up as late as him, and Naruto often found himself either feigning slumber, so that she would voluntarily rest, or having to carry her to her bed, after she accidentally fell asleep during their conversations. Yet he very much appreciated the sentiment, and found himself going out of his way to begin helping Lily with her duties, as thanks. This night began for them much like the others, and the fire continued its waltz, as Lily took her spot next to Naruto in the pew. She admired his visage, as he stared soberly at the light reflecting from the crucifix aloft on the wall. That stare gifted him an aura of a man far older than he was, and was part of the reason that Lily had trouble seeing him, as a teenage boy. "Are you sure that you want to go with them tomorrow?" the nun asked. It wasn't necessarily out of worry for his success. She had seen his prowess many times before. Rather, she had grown quite fond of the boy sitting next to her. He was mature for a 20-year-old, and she found herself seeing him as a peer that she could confide in, a pleasant change from her motherly role over the other children. "Yeah," Naruto replied. "I feel that I've done what I can here. I need to branch out and see what the world is like, and the magic nights seem like exactly what I'm looking for." Silence settled again, interrupted occasionally by the cackle of the fire. All the while, Lily couldn't help but remember that this was their last night together for quite some time. There wouldn't be another chance to talk between just the two of them for some span of months, potentially even years. This was her final chance to learn who the man she had grown so fond of truly was. "You know, in all the years you've lived here, you've never once shown us your grimoire." The statement masked the true question poorly, but straightforwardly asking to see somebody's grimoire felt weirdly wrong to her. Grimoires were personal to the wielder, so it wasn't taboo to ask to see another's, but it wasn't a practice that many partook in. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Is it a problem?" "No, not at all. I've just always been curious as to why that is." The boy finally conceded. Maybe it's finally time to open up, Naruto thought. He has spent the better part of 3 years avoiding questions of his personal life, for reasons that he couldn't truly justify to himself. Here beside him was a pure-hearted woman eager to learn about him, and for the first time since he had met her, he decided to indulge in her curiosity. "Do you want to hear a secret, Lily?" "What kind of secret?" she inquired. "An interesting one." Naruto unclasped the strap that held a book firmly on his thigh, and retrieved it, holding it firmly. "This isn't a grimoire. I don't have one. Never did." His fingers grazed the ruined leather cover where his Jiraiya's name was once inked. His copy of The Tale of an Utterly Gutsy Ninja had been one of his only relics from his previous life. During the Fourth Great War, the book had evolved from a keepsake novel to a creed, one that he happily brandished in a leather pouch in place of the grimoire that he never had. To him, the work of fiction had a far greater power than any that a mage's spell book could produce. "This is a novel that my godfather wrote during his time in war. My parents actually named me after the main character." He smiled lightly. 4,000 years couldn't erase the image of his parents and godparents from his memory. It didn't sell well, and he followed it up by writing porn, the perverted bastard, but I've always thought this novel was his masterpiece. It was the work that showed me the maturity and wisdom hidden within him. I'd love to meet him one day. He died a very long time ago. Lily grew visibly solemn at the statement, and Naruto immediately soothed her distress. "I don't let it bother me that much anymore. If he saw me sulking around feeling sorry for him, he'd probably turn in his grave. I try to honor his memory every moment that I can instead. He died so that peace could be attained, and I plan on following through with his legacy." He sounded like a great man, she surmised. "You'd change your mind if you met him," Naruto jokes. Lily chuckled. "Would you tell me what the book is about?" Naruto smiled, and Lily could have sworn that it was the first genuine smile that had graced his visage since he had come to the church. He began a translated reading of his favorite excerpt, while Lily made herself comfortable leaning on his shoulder, a platonic gesture that the two had come to enjoy together. Lily had soon become enamored in the tale that Naruto was weaving, finding a numbing comfort in the rhythmic rise and fall of his shoulders, coupled with the vibrations his voice caused throughout his chest. Soon his voice found the end of the passage, and the story dissipated with the breeze of the night. Perhaps that was where it should stay. Memories of the ancient past weren't for the daylight, never something to be expressed in the comfort of the sun. No, they found their home in the dark, surrounded in a cacophony of crickets and secrets. "You know, it's also occurred to me that I don't know what magic you use, either. All the powers that you've shown have been a mix and match of different magic types, and I can't pinpoint an exact one out of any known archetype." But, Naruto thought, the man had made sure to keep a reserve on his higher-end techniques, while under the scrutiny of the townsfolk. There had already been occasions of mages with the ability to sense magic, becoming distraught with the magicless foreigner who could still cast spells. He didn't need them to see the scope of his destructive power, or to realize that he was drawing on chakra, not magic energy. Additionally, if the kingdom could witness the raw carnal power that he had stored away, he was sure that a summons would be sent for him to report to the capital to explain his abilities, and there were simply no events following that scenario that didn't end with his mind being searched and his immortality being discovered. Thus, he never risked it. "My magic is being a jack of all trades," he teased. Lily chuckled a bit. He always seemed so dedicated not to discuss anything personal about himself. She wondered how somebody could become so close to her, and yet so distant. "But how do you cast your jack of all trades magic so efficiently without a grimoire, then?" she pressured. If this was the last night she would be with him for an unknown amount of time, she was determined to get some information out of him. She couldn't very well claim to care so much for somebody, and not know a single thing about them. I don't know, he replied. It always just comes naturally to me, I guess. Naturally, the explanation didn't satisfy Lily in the slightest, and she found it increasingly difficult to keep her patience. Her selfish desire for answers was beginning to overcome her sense of empathy and secrecy. Perhaps her desperation clouded her politeness, but it had been a long while since she could say she had desired something with such passion, and right now, she desired answers. Naruto could see the childish pout forming on her face, and let out a chortle, causing the younger woman to separate from his shoulder, and playfully hit his arm. They bantered for a little while longer, and before either realized it, the sun was peeking its way through the windows of the chapel. The stained glass cast brilliant shades of color onto the walls and floors, and for a few moments, Naruto let himself be lost in the beautiful hues. Lily instead stared up at him with intent, examining the oceans of his eyes, and the terrain of his cheeks one final time. Maybe she was trying to memorize his face, as if it was the last time she would see him. Perhaps she was afraid that the moment she blinked he would be gone, and she would be left alone at night again. She didn't know herself. There was no explicit desire behind it. His departure wasn't the loss of a lover or even the next chapter in a good friend's life. It was saying goodbye to a family that she wasn't quite ready to say goodbye to. Asta and Yuno's journey was one that she had seen coming since their childhood. One that she had come to terms with. She had watched them grow from children to adults, seeing herself more as a mother figure to them than anything else. She had raised them, and recognized their journey as a necessary one for their development into adulthood. With Naruto, though, Naruto was a peer. A brilliant, thoughtful, charismatic man that she had incidentally latched herself onto. He made her feel grounded and safe in a world that was everything the opposite. He gave everyone in the village a figure to aspire to, and she was no exception. His advice was wise beyond his years, and compassionate down to his core. He was funny and kind, and a ray of light in a place that desperately needed one. She would miss him dearly. More than she could put into words. Without notice, she felt tears welling up, and Naruto finally looked from the colors on the walls, and stared her in the eyes, seeing the strain in her mind, and giving her a soft smile of understanding. A tear fell, and he used his thumb to wipe it away from her cheek, only causing another to run down her other cheek. Lily found herself embraced in a hug whose warmth she couldn't describe, and for the first time in a very long time, let herself cry. She wrapped her arms around his torso, and held on, as tight as she could, hoping that if she didn't let go, he wouldn't leave. Naruto felt the desperation in her touch, and lightly stroked her head, whispering words of comfort to her. He didn't try to stop her crying. It was something that she needed. A bittersweet end to the nights that were for only the two of them. The odyssey to the capital was harsh and nostalgic for Naruto. It reminded him of his treks to and from the hidden villages, when terrain would change abruptly, and weather conditions always bordered their climate's extremes. He even found the constant bickering of his two companions charming to some extent, reminded of himself and Sasuke in their youth. Though he broke up their quarrels if they ever went too far, he concluded that a healthy rivalry between the two was exactly what they needed to grow stronger. Hell, if it worked for Sasuke, and him as horrifically dysfunctional as it was, why couldn't it work for another two of similar standing? Before long the dirt paths gave way to cobblestone roads, as an enormous walled city bounded into view. Asta, as with most things, was utterly enthralled by the sight along with Yuno, who kept his expression on a much tighter leash. It was far different from belief, yet Naruto enjoyed the familiar feeling of an energetic town ripe with patriotism and sincerity, nonetheless. Their journey finally came to a close when the trio entered the large brick archway of the examination arena. Once the boys had reached the inner field, things instantly took a turn for the chaotic. For one reason or another, the captains of the knights saw it fit to use some rare species of bird to make initial examinations of the magic levels of the prospective recruits. Within seconds, both Asta and Naruto were flocked with dozens of avians, indicating their severe lack of magic reserves. The conduct with which the birds conducted themselves, however, was the difference between night and day. Asta ran fervently around the arena, desperately trying to save his face and shoulders from being nicked by the birds' beaks. It drew a small laugh from Naruto, and a pitiful smile from Yuno. The birds flocking on the sage, however, instead perched on his shoulders and head, nuzzling into him, as if seeking warmth. He surmised that it was due to his connection with nature energy, and instead of swatting them away, carefully reached into his pack, and pulled a loaf of stale bread from his travel rations, tearing pieces off, and letting the birds peck at them, as they pleased. This action did not go unnoticed by a certain man in the Sea of Children, who, before he could make his way towards Naruto, was run into by the turbulent mass that was Asta. Within seconds, Asta was grabbed by the face, and lifted into the air. With all eyes in the arena on Asta and the man, Naruto let ring another laugh at the expense of his companion. If this was what the capital would be like every day, he was sure that he could come to enjoy it. When the commotion ended with the large man disappearing into the corridors outside of the field, a fanfare of cheers and applause erupted, drawing Naruto's eyes from the birds on his shoulders to the seats, adorning the upper deck of the seats in the Colosseum. There stood 9 figures, among which was the man who had disciplined his star not moments ago. Most of the birds flew away at the start of the noise, leaving only those still gorging themselves on Naruto's rations, seemingly unaware that their brethren had already evacuated. The sage took this time to have a seat on the ground, easing himself into a lotus position, and still happily enjoying the company of his new friends, while absent-mindedly listening to what a man in the balcony was saying. Soon the helmeted man shouted some incantation, and a hole seemed to open in the sky. From it descended the roots of a tree, which molded and perceived themselves into the shapes of brooms, a single broom for each of the participants. After a broom was laid gently on the ground in front of him, Naruto dismissed the rest of the test after hearing the rules. He could fly, sure. Throw on his 6-path sage mode, and he could probably hit Mach 1 by the time the rest of the examinees could mount their brooms. Yet, he felt no need. This wasn't the place to pull out some divine power and show his superiority over those who were testing with him. He didn't need to outshine anybody here at the art of broom straddling. Rather, while the other candidates were trying to maintain what little balance they could manage in the air or, in Asta's case, attempting to achieve liftoff, he stayed seated, feeding, and stroking the birds around him, content with failing this part of the examination. He had heard that the last stage was a mock battle test, and that was where his true colors would shine. His inactivity, however, did not go unnoticed by the captains watching. A majority cast him aside, as either a talentless one-up, while others cursed his seeming disrespect for the sacred rite that was being administered to him. Only 3 captains had no such thoughts, all watching him speculatively in their own right. How is it that those birds are so passive towards him? I already know he has little to no magic power, but shouldn't they be attacking him rather than coddling him? William thought. How is this child so content with completely blowing the first part of the exam? Charlotte thought. I want to fight this guy, Yami thought. There was something about him, Yami saw, that none of the other potential recruits had. Though he looked carefree, his guard was up. The blonde's hand was constantly hovering a pouch on his right thigh, which the captain assumed contained some type of weapon. Furthermore, if the other captains looked closer, they could see the boy's eyes constantly darting around the arena. What he was searching for one could only guess, but somehow, Yami knew. Escape routes, strategic points, evacuation plans. He sized each and every one of us up the moment he laid eyes on us. Our physical capabilities, blind spots, fighting styles based on physicality. He has the fortitude of a seasoned veteran. Yami took the last drag of his cigarette, flicked it on the floor, and stomped it out. He formed a relaxed smile, and let the smoke billow through his teeth with the exhales of a chuckle. This kid is something else, I can already tell. Naruto soon sent the birds away, with the test ending poorly for both he and Asta. Soon many other tests followed. Shooting magic into a brick wall. Naruto didn't think he had many techniques that would suffice for the task without obliterating a large chunk of the floor, as well. Hitting moving targets. He sent out a few kunai which all hit bullseye, but he could tell it wasn't quite what the captains were looking for. Create a small figure with magic. A little wood style would have done the trick, but he didn't need them to think he was related to that tree magic user in any way. So, Naruto piled up some small rocks into a small tower, excitedly showing a star, and you know how high he could get it, until it toppled to the ground with the placement of a small pebble at the apex. The trio laughed a bit at the antics, much to the dismay of many of the captains watching. Still, Naruto was happy to give Asta a bit of relief from the frustration he was surely going through. Finally, the last test was announced. A mock battle between participants to ascertain their fighting capabilities. Naruto took a look at both Yuno and Asta. Yuno held his calm demeanor well, most likely entirely confident in his capabilities. Naruto was certain that whoever was unfortunate enough to fight the kid would regret it for the next few days. He felt the same for Asta, but looking at the boy told a different story than Yuno's confidence. He must have been shell-shocked at his lack of ability in all of the previous tests. It was most certainly draining whatever poise he had regarding his capabilities. Naruto took the opportunity to put his arm around Asta's shoulder and whisper closely into his ear. Listen to me, Asta. You've been preparing your whole life for this moment. You know, as well, as I do that with your physical prowess, and that sword of yours, you'd mop the floor with any of these chumps. So, stick your chest out, keep your head up, and wipe those smug looks off of everyone's faces, alright. Asta looked over at Naruto, and his defeated face became a feral grin. He nodded sharply, his confidence coming back to him, and he entered the arena for his bout. And what a slaughter it was. Just as Naruto had predicted, Asta took the kid out in a single hit, erasing all doubts about his power to any of those in attendance. Yuno came later, cementing his prodigal status, and earning the respect he deserved from the captains. Soon most of the fights had ended, with Naruto standing alone in the center of the arena. The sound conclusion of the examinees was that they would rather stick with fighting the magic that they had seen during the exam, than risk fighting the foreigner who could handle weapons. Even with the assurance that he had little to no magic power, an unknown threat was not one that you should jump into. A good conclusion in Naruto's eyes. Yet, there were no more recruits to be tested save for him, and he stood relaxed, staring up at the captains, wondering what their solution for this problem would be. So, I wouldn't happen to just get a free buy and pass this part, would I? Naruto jokes. He could tell that they didn't find it funny, so he turned to the other participants and scanned for any willing challengers. Anybody want to go again? He asked. He immediately heard the sound of a wooden chair creaking as he turned to the balcony. Getting up from his seat was the man who had a run-in with his star before the tests had begun. He towered over the rest of the captains, wearing a tattered black cloak over his dirt-ridden tank top. The man hopped the railing and landed with a resounding thud a few meters away from where Naruto was standing. He took a drag from a cigarette and blew the smoke, walking slow paces towards where Naruto was standing. If nobody wants him, I'll take him, Yami said. Most of the examinees cowered backwards in fear at the sight of the man. He protruded a dark aura, one that Naruto could compare to the killing intent of Zabuza. He was obviously trying to frighten Naruto into backing out, but with a hard head like Naruto had, there was always something to prove to an opponent who thought themselves superior. Instead, Naruto gave a genuine smile at the challenge. Many of the captains began harsh whispers between themselves, wondering what Yami's plan through all of this was. The whispers were cut quiet as William raised his hand. He stood from his seat and peered at the two from his perch. This is quite unprecedented, the captain said. Normally there would be another participant willing to fight again, or we would have a junior knight on standby in cases of odd numbers. Yet, I'm interested to see what your answer to the provocation is, Mr. Uzumaki, Naruto replied. Naruto Uzumaki. And yeah, I think I'd like to have a go at the big guy. He seemed strong. Yami and William smiled at this. They both liked a guy who wouldn't back down from a challenge, no matter how insurmountable the odds. William sat back down. Then I see no reason to deny this request. Yami, don't hurt the boy too much. Sure thing, Yami replied, grinning. The combatants both turned to face each other, both eager to cross fists. Naruto raised his voice. I can tell that's a nice katana you have strapped to your waist. Wanna go with just swords for a bit? Yami would have grinned harder if his face would allow it. Instead it contorted into something that looked much more sinister. Still, Naruto wasn't lost to the sentiment. Yami nodded, unsheathing his sword and holding it to his side. Naruto in turn let his right hand open wide, from which an abnormally long emerged from thin air, shocking everybody in the arena. There were murmurs of spatial magic and teleportation, all of which Naruto ignored. It had been thousands of years since he had faced any sort of challenge, and while he wasn't proud to admit it, he loved the thrill of a good battle. Naruto and Yami locked eyes, and when the hala cried out for them to begin, they both dashed at each other. From the initial speed that Yami held, Naruto could tell that he was using some type of magic to bolster his physical capabilities. Probably something similar to channeling chakra in certain body parts to augment your movement and power. Still, Naruto wasn't a slacker when it came to physical conditioning, and he readily met the speed at which Yami began his assault. They launched into their respective patterns, with Yami aiming for powerful attacks or parries to precede them. Naruto on the other hand favored evasion, weaving between strikes to find some sort of opening, and to Yami's credit, those openings were few and far between. It wasn't just that the guy practiced. Naruto could tell this man had seen a real battle. He had learned his weaknesses firsthand by way of getting wounded in a fight. He had the heart of a warrior, one that had both given and received countless blows. But so did Naruto, and this man was a few millennia too early to challenge a sage. 20 seconds of furious slashing had passed, and Naruto was finally able to slip through the man's guard and aim a thrust to his chest. Noticing his fault, Yami's reflexes kicked in, and his sword was suddenly coated in black magic energy, gaining speed and aiming its trajectory at Naruto's throat. Feeling the sword getting closer, Naruto abandoned his attack and leapt away, landing in a crouch nearly 5 meters from his opponent. He looked up grinning, both excited by the fight and prideful that he had pushed the man this far. He now ascertained the purely physical capacity of the man. I guess the sword's only rule is off the table now? Naruto asked. Instead of answering, Yami didn't relent in his attack, sprinting forward at the ninja. Great battle sense. Don't ease off the attack. If he had, I would have beaten him there, Naruto thought. He disappeared into his right hand again, and in his place came 5 kunai, each with a cork handle coated in strange black markings. He stood up lightly, and waited for Yami to diminish the gap between them. When the captain was just close enough to begin his sword swing, Naruto shot the kunai into the ground, forming a tight pentagon around them both. Instantaneously, when Yami closed the distance between them and entered the ring of knives, Naruto disappeared in a blinding yellow flash, causing Yami to squint his eyes for a split second. In any normal fight, that split second would have been negligible due to the captain's reaction time. However, in this moment, that split second was all that Naruto needed to secure his victory. The minute the flash erupted, Yami felt a boot collide with his left temple. Once the impact had set, he immediately felt another shot straight in the solar plexus. Another in the right cheek. A knife cut through his arm. A fist to the ribs. A roundhouse to the back. An uppercut. Finally, a kick to the back of the leg forced him to a knee, which brought his head right to the level of a haymaker that sent him barreling across the field into the brick wall. He slammed to the ground in a heap, trying to register just what the hell had happened. He painfully turned his head to where he was just standing, and saw Naruto gingerly picking up the knives that he had thrown into the ground. Once finished securing them, he made his way over to the man he had just pummeling, and in a show of respect, offered a hand for Yami to get up with. Yami eyed the smiling man standing above him, in absolute disbelief at what had just occurred. 1 minute he was poised to strike a lethal blow, and the next minute he was 50 feet away in a crater of the boy's making. He couldn't help but laugh. The man let out a hysterical fit of laughter, as he took the boy's hand to get himself up. His laughter was occasionally disrupted by grunts of pain, and when he fumbled due to the strain on his legs, Naruto helped him steady himself, smiling while looking up at the captain. So does this mean I pass? Yami laughed harder at that. He had Naruto help him turn to the balcony, and look up at the rest of the captains. When his laughter died, all that was left was a smile far brighter than any of his comrades had seen him make. I want this kid, Yami said. Many of the captains still sat in disbelief at what had transpired. The only evidence that anything had happened in the last stretch of the fight were a few seconds of blinding golden light, followed by Yami being catapulted into the side of the arena. Fugolian was the first to voice his disbelief. Did that boy just beat Yami? Muttered words of there's no way, and I can't believe it were traded between the captains, as Williams stood from his seat. While his composure was that of a usual stoic commander, his inner thoughts were a turmoil of confusion, and attempts of figuring out what the hell this kid just did. There were very few things that registered in his eye during the final confrontation. He knew that there were multiple flashes of the golden light, each followed by Yami receiving a devastating blow. The amount of power to send Yami hurtling away must have been tremendous, an even more surprising feat, given the absolute lack of magic power the boy was deemed to have. He collected his thoughts, as best he could, and raised his voice to make announcements. The winner of the final match is Naruto Uzumaki. Now, if all participants would gather in the center of the arena so that we may give you our placement offerings. While the participants entered the arena, most keeping their distance from the blonde-haired monstrosity who just demolished a seasoned veteran, a boy suddenly erupted from the corridors under the stadium seating, sprinting over to Yami. Captain Yami. Are you okay? He yelled. Nearing the pair of fighters, the boy took Yami from Naruto, letting him lean on his shoulder for support. Naruto stayed put, as the guy took Yami into the corridors again, either for medical treatment or to take him back to the balcony for the placements. While disappearing into the darkened hallways, Yami gave a wave to Naruto over his shoulder. That was fun, kid. Let's do it again next time when I don't go easy on you. Naruto chuckled at that. Anytime, old man. I haven't kicked someone's ass like that in a while. Yami muttered something inaudible under his breath, and he soon dispersed into the halls, reappearing on the balcony of the stadium, as the boy with him helped him into his seat. Every captain was staring at him, expecting some sort of inane excuse, as to why he lost a physical battle, his specialty, to a boy barely out of his teens. Yami, however, wasn't one for excuses at that point. When he realized he had the attention of each of his peers, he gave an exasperated sigh, leaning back into his chair, as easily as he could to dull the pain. What do you want? He asked rhetorically. The kid was just that good. The group grew even more distraught at learning that this wasn't just some ploy where Yami had taken it incredibly easy on his opponent. Before they could launch into a barrage of questions, Yami silenced them with another thought. I've never met somebody who could completely overwhelm me like that. I didn't lose because I did poorly. Hell, I got serious the minute I felt his first sword blow. I lost because that Naruto brat is leagues ahead of me in terms of physical combat. But just what was that power that he used? Charlotte asked. Yami narrowed his eyebrows. I have no clue. One moment I had him, the next I was on the ground, and hurting bad. Feel free to go see for yourself, he added. With the discourse dying down in the box, the selection began. Many prospects received no offers from the squad. Some received one. Even fewer received more than that. Naruto grew excited for Yuno when he got his choice of whatever squad he wanted, and was equally elated when a star received an offer from the man that Naruto had beaten. They had finally achieved the first steps of their dreams, and he was thrilled to be able to witness each of them coming into their own. When Naruto had stepped into the center of the arena for one final time, he could feel the eyes of each individual in the premises boring into him. William hesitated for a moment, then finally raised his voice. Number 166. Each captain shot their hand upward with blinding speed. It surprisingly took Naruto a little off guard. He had expected offers from most if not all of the captains, but the enthusiasm with which they were pursuing him was quite astonishing. Still, without having known who would give him offers, he didn't put too much thought into who he would join. Now that he had his pick, he was able to narrow it down to two options. The whole plan to fix the aristocracy could very well ride on whatever choice he made here. So he had to consider which story would read better to the masses. An unknown foreign commoner rising through the ranks of the Golden Dawn to become a prominent figure in society, washing away the prejudices as to what a commoner could achieve. Or an unknown foreign commoner joining the misfit ranks of the Black Bulls, helping to raise the Bulls' reputation from a squad of nobodies to the most elite force in the kingdom. Now that he thought about it, the answer was quite obvious to him. He gave a smile, as he yelled to the captains. "Thanks for all the offers, guys, but I think I'm going to have to go with." His sentence was cut short, as a gentle hand was placed on his shoulder. "Now, Mr. Uzumaki. I wouldn't be too hasty with your choice." Audible gasps quelled the silence that once dominated the arena. Naruto turned to look at the man who had interrupted him, standing face to face with a figure he thought he wouldn't meet for at least another few months. "Lord Julius," Naruto commented. "I wasn't aware that the standing Wizard King presided over the recruitment exams." Julius gave an innocent smile, and a look into Naruto's eyes that read, "You know exactly why I'm here." Well, usually they wouldn't. However, I heard of some special talent beating a captain in a duel, and thought that I'd come have a private chat with the young man. He gestured towards the exit of the arena. "Why don't you come with me, and we can talk a bit before you decide which squad to join." Naruto didn't have much reason to hesitate other than the worries of government officials searching through his mind. He opted against his qualms, however, electing that a one-on-one chat with the current most powerful wizard wouldn't be an unwelcome experience to elevate his current standing. "Sure thing," Naruto replied, following the man from the center of the field, only leaving those in attendance more confused, more shocked, and more envious. The comment from Yami gave concrete sound to the thought that every person was working their head around. What the hell was up with that? After a lengthier walk than expected, Naruto tailed Julius into his office, being motioned towards a quaint cushioned seat opposite an intricate futon, both separated by a far too elaborate coffee table, nesting freshly brewed tea. Naruto made himself comfortable in the chair while Julius latched the door close, and strode towards the futon. "That was quite the impressive fight you had with Yami. To beat him is not a feat to take lightly. I'd say he's one of, if not, the strongest mage in the country aside from myself," Julius said, sitting down. Naruto smiled gently at the praise, picking up one of the teacups, and taking a conservative sip. "I guess I got lucky then." Julius chuckled at the response. "I wouldn't go that far." "Oh, you wouldn't?" Naruto quipped. Julius grinned. "Yami doesn't usually fight new recruits," he stated. "In fact, a captain offering to take part in the selection exams has never happened before. I'm honestly quite surprised the first captain to do so was Yami, given how little interest he has in these sorts of events." It felt like the king was leading up to something, but Naruto couldn't ascertain what that was, so simply shrugged his shoulders, and allowed the other man to continue. "The only reason I see Yami volunteering for that sort of excursion would be one of two reasons. Either you somehow made him very, very angry, or he saw something special in you out of all the other hundreds of recruits. Well, with his temperament I wouldn't doubt the first option. The look on his face after that fight leads me to believe the latter." The smile of the man opposite him grew even more unsettling while Naruto listened to his words. There was a certain tone to Julius's voice that unnerved the sage, as if he was withholding some delicate piece of information that the blonde should already be aware of. It wasn't smugness, but more a one-sided assumption that both of them knew the underlying subject of conversation. "Have you ever heard of the Epic of the Rakuto Sennin?" Julius asked. The question caught Naruto off guard. Never again had he thought he would hear Hagoromo's name, especially 5,000 years after his passing. His very existence had already become myth by the time Naruto became a ninja, so he found it highly unreasonable that his legacy had carried into this new year. Yet the utterance of the demigod's alias shattered any of those doubts away. A sudden desperation for answers swelled within the blonde, only to be subdued by his forced stoicism. The facade, as a foreigner, was essential to the future of his desegregation of the classes, and any twitch of the eye or slip of the tongue could lead to his interrogator breaking through his carefully constructed veneer. "Can't say I'm familiar." Julius relaxed backwards into the futon, taking a generous gulp of tea before responding. "It's a truly enthralling tale about a sage who lived some millennia ago. He wielded ultimate power, and rid the world of an ancient evil before disappearing immediately after. We wouldn't know of his existence had a group of dedicated chroniclers not detailed his exploits in a very old time. The tale is famous really only among historians and scholars, but it's quite famous nonetheless, what with being one of the oldest texts to be continually translated and copied throughout history." "Can I ask who these dedicated chroniclers were?" Naruto queried. He tried not to let the fierceness of his question flow through his tone, but years of meditation couldn't erase all of his old self, and it seemed a hint of his more brash nature remained. "They went by a pseudonym. The Five Shadows. Ring a bell?" Some sort of self-righteous attitude was slithering its way into Julius's questions that Naruto was beginning to become irritated with. He quickly retreated into reflection, trudging through the memories of the old world for any historians or literary marvels that he could muster. Sadly, his attention in the academy was more focused on how to survive through next month, with 6 cups of ramen and spoiled milk, rather than moderner historical literature and composition. If Shirei were alive at the time, I would have immediately assumed him, given I could bring myself to believe that he could write anything other than smut. But why does that word sound so familiar? Shadow. In the old tongue I think that would be cage, so the 5-0. "Oh. Tsunade, you causing problems for me even now, huh?" Breaking from his thoughts, Naruto addressed the king, as nonchalantly as possible. "Can't say that I've ever heard of their work, but thank you for the information. I'll be sure to use it at the next trivia night I go to. You're the sage, aren't you? Julius asked. There was a pause. Pardon? Julius answered without hesitation. You're the sage. The immortal sage of legend. Sir, with all due respect, I believe that you're mistaking history with mythology. The king ignored him, as he pressed forwards. You match all the descriptions of the ancient texts. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks on both cheeks. Teleports in a flash of golden light. Handy with bladed weapons. Immense strength. Immortal which, I may add, would have thrown me off your tracks had you not materialized from nowhere 3 years ago in the land that was said to have been occupied by the Leaf Village, some odd 4,000 years ago. Not ringing any bells here, sir. Naruto leaned forwards, setting down the teacup, and resting his chin on his hands. His visage changed into one of unbridled intensity, as his gaze rose, and met with the sovereign's. But, for the sake of the argument, let's say that I was the sage. Why in my right mind would I bring that knowledge to light? Because you can help this country. Naruto was suddenly underwhelmed. Of course I can help this country. I've been planning it for 3 years. Why the hell else would I be here? Thoughts of the king mistaking him, as some overlord bent on taking over the world filtered through his mind, but he forced them out. Surely Julius realized if that were the case, it would have happened the minute he exited that cave. He eased backwards into his chair comfortably, again donning the feigned ignorance he had previously shown. Already working on that on my own. Still, I think you have the wrong guy. Julius still wasn't convinced, suddenly losing some composure. Oh come on, your name is written in the damned book. Naruto Uzumaki. The Sage of Six Paths. He who stole a god's powers to rid the world of evil. He colluded with demons in pursuit of the ultimate craft. He sealed himself away so as to not let any of his enviable power fall into the wrong hands. Julius ended his tirade near out of breath, leaning forward with his hands clenching the wooden frame of the coffee table. His smile had long since faded into a visage of reckless desire, and Naruto fixed his eyesight to the king's, and experienced a revelation. I have completely misunderstood the intent behind this conversation. Julius wasn't mentioning this information as some heinous accusation. There was some sort of abnormal passion in his tone. Naruto suddenly felt less of an interrogated prisoner faking ignorance for a crime, and more like a scholar unwilling to give answers to a student. There were details that Naruto had that the king wanted desperately, and Julius had already totally convinced himself that the blonde was the answer to his questions. There's no convincing him otherwise, is there? Naruto thought. Even if I deny it, and walk out of here now, there will always be eyes on me, waiting for my persona to slip, and provide him with evidence. Naruto had grown tired of this back and forth, and finally understanding the futility of his denial, deferred to giving the man the information that he desired. Okay, none of anything you just said happened, so I might wanna update your libraries pretty soon. Julius was exasperated, releasing his grip on the table. So you are the Sage of Six Paths. No, I'm not, Naruto clarified. Yes, I am a sage. Yes, I can use the Six Paths power. No, I am not the Sage of Six Paths. He died long before I was born. So you're not Naruto Uzumaki, but you are a sage of equal caliber? Julius asked. The sage in question could tell that the information being given, and the historical records of the kingdom, were clashing in the monarch's psyche, making any attempt at understanding the true story difficult. No, I am Naruto Uzumaki. Born and raised in the village hidden in the leaves. I seriously do recommend getting better record keepers. A lot of the information you have from back then is very flawed. Then who is the Sage of Six Paths? Julius pressed. At this, Naruto started to become slightly annoyed. Listen, are we going to talk about the past all day, or are you going to tell me why you called me here? I admit it. I'm the sage from those heavily embellished stories. What do you want? The better question is, what do you want? Julius resolved. Why join the Magic Knights with all of your power, assuming that the records of said power are true? Naruto's words shot forward. Because I want to make a change to this incredibly flawed country, and I can't do that by just pouncing into the limelight, and doing it by force. I've seen it tried. It's never worked. Memories of Madara and pain crept their way into view, only to be cast back into the depths of his consciousness again. Naruto had no desire to remember the faces of those who had forced him into this tortuously extended life. The only moment he wanted to recall them was when he could finally contradict their values and create peace through his own methods. Julius held firm with his line of questioning. But why our country? Why not the Diamond Kingdom? They're obviously far more tyrannical and militaristic than we are. There's a much better argument to be made for changing their ways before ours. You wanna know why I started here? Pure luck. The sentence almost made Naruto snicker. There weren't many supernatural concepts that he believed in. He'd already voiced his distaste for the concept of destiny and fate. However, luck. That was definitely something Naruto believed in, and he certainly felt that he had it in abundance. The sage continued, this country was where I came out of meditation. This country was where I made my first friends in my new life. This country was where I experienced the first prejudices of the new world. So I decided to start here. But believe me, I wouldn't stop here. I wouldn't stop until I've changed this entire world for the better. And what better is that? The world without those prejudices. One without classist values. One without endless war and needless violence. Naruto swallowed some grief before willingly divulging bits of sentimental information. I come from a time where war was far deadlier than what you could ever imagine. I was 13 when I first killed someone. I was the same age when my best friend put a hole through my chest. 4 years later the end of the world came due to the arrogance of a dead man. I'll be damned if I let this world and its people see the same fate that my own did. 4,000 years can make you forget a lot, but I'll never forget the struggles I faced, and what I would give to make sure others don't have to face the same. Julius's countenance suddenly changed from critical to a much softer acceptance. The words that Naruto spoke seemed to have eased his distress at whatever intentions the Immortal had when coming to the capital. That's a hard dream to strive for, the king acknowledged. That thing I have a thick skull and a can-do attitude, Naruto rebutted. They both smiled at that. A bit of time passed, as Julius let the gears shift into place, and his mind settled. Suddenly he let out a hearty laugh, and let it fade with a hum. I can't believe that I actually found the Sage of Legend. Equally surprised, Naruto replied, I can't believe they wrote a book about me. With the interrogation aside, Julius adopted an expression of dynamism, as he took a lofty breath for his new line of inquiries. Well, with that out of the way, please tell me more about your past. What was it like? What got left out of the history books? What was substituted in? Can you show me some of your power? Who is the Sage of Six Paths if not you? Did you really steal powers from a god? Did you really collude with the demons? The sudden vigor in his tone surprised the sage, and Naruto spent the next few hours answering the king's questions under the promise that he would never openly discuss it. Who was the Sage of Six Paths? An old geezer with much more power than he ever needed. He died maybe a millennium before I was born. Why was he called that? No idea about the Six Paths part, to be honest. But apparently he was one of the first to completely master and utilize the sage arts from Mount Maiboku. What are sages, and where is Mount Maiboku? Somebody who was taught to harness the energy within nature to heavily augment their skills, and either non-existent or very far away, respectively. Could sage arts be taught? Only if you want to go through the horrendously painful process of opening your chakra coils, and you want to risk an early death by petrification. You turn into stone. A stone statue of whatever summoning beast clan you're learning the art from, to be exact. The hell's a summoning beast? Price, Julius. After much back and forth, the men reached an agreement where in the near future, with Naruto's begrudging permission, Julius would subtly replace the old texts of the Epic of the Rakuto Sennin with a heavily revised version written by the two of them. Julius was never to publicly reveal that Naruto gave the information to him, and would pass off the new volume as an updated translation. In exchange for this, Julius proposed a drastically modified arrangement to the subject of choosing a squad to join. You don't want me to join any of the squads. Precisely. Am I at liberty to ask why? I kinda like that Yomi guy. He seemed fun. Julius grinned at that, but nevertheless continued the complicated reasoning behind his new scheme. Restraining you to a squad would dampen the influence that you could potentially have. If you joined the Black Bulls, you would instantly lose favor with most of the noble populace, if any favor would have been given at all, considering you're technically classified as a foreigner. Joining the Golden Dawn would have been the better choice, but you would be constantly paraded on a pedestal, effectively ostracizing yourself from the commoners that you so dearly want to help. The Dawn would ignore your status, and play you, as some lost nobility recently discovered. I trust that William would never try to strip you of your social standing, but I can't say the same for some of the higher-up elitists that he has by his side, Julius finished. So what, then couldn't I go with one right down the middle? The Crimson Lion's commander looked quite inviting if I read the mood correctly. Naruto remembered the intense desire present in the Crimson Lion's commander, when he offered Naruto a spot during the exams. Julius shook his head, and laid bare the plan that he had devised. What I'm proposing is the formation of a separate unit, completely independent from the 9 Magic Knight squads under my direct command. I would have you work with each of the squads separately, either aiding in training or assisting with missions. That way you could branch out with each of the squad leaders and gain influence with each of them at a much faster rate than I could if I were to go it alone, Naruto concluded. I gotta say it's a clever plan. Julius nodded proudly, and continued. Most of the Magic Knight squads are headed by a number of powerful noble families. The Silvas and the Vermilions to name a few. Falling in good favor with them early will lead to a lot less trouble later on. So is this a 10th squad? Julius closed his eyes, attempting to find the correct wording for his proposed plan. You could call it that. I don't think it would be very official, and there wouldn't be any members other than you. Think of it as a separate force from the Magic Knights altogether. I think it used to be called Black Ops. Naruto's tone changed quickly from quizzical to some sort of intense professionalism that Julius had only seen in some of his veterans. So you want me for assassination and sabotage as well? The blonde inquired. Julius paled slightly at having seemingly offended the physical manifestation of God. I believe that I have slightly misunderstood what the term Black Ops means. I wouldn't ask you to do something so heinous unless you were willing and ready. The last part was added quickly, like the fine print in a 100-page contract. Naruto narrowed his brows. You've got a darker side to you than I would have thought. Julius let out a sigh that Naruto recognized. It was the sigh of a man burdened by responsibility. It spoke of emotions that the king couldn't confide in others. Weariness from his job, and dissatisfaction from choices that he'd previously had to make. It was the same sign that Tsunade and Hiruzen would let out after assigning missions with a low survivability rate. It takes a lot to run a kingdom, Julius admitted. Sometimes decisions have to be made for the good of the people, even against my own morals. Naruto empathized with the man's plight, and absolutely hated what he did. Many tough calls had to be made for a kingdom to run prosperously. It was a shame that those calls often dirtied both your hands and your conscience. And once you made the call, there was no return. You had to live with the guilt and the hidden stain on your honor. Finding his footing on the issue, Naruto spoke up. Fine, I'll do this whole Black Ops thing or whatever it is, too. However, I have a condition. You tell. Any of these morally questionable missions you assign me, I get to look at all the mission details and decide for myself whether I will undertake them. I'm sure you already have a much more directable covert ops group willing to heed your beck and call, which is why I'm sure you'll only send me on very specific missions pertaining to my assets. If I don't think it aligns with my vision of the country's future, I will decline, and there will be no qualms about it. That's a hefty condition, Julius replied, simultaneously weighing the benefits and detriments of Naruto's demand. Well, you'd have to have some steel hanging between your legs to order around the Sage of Legend, Naruto answered smugly. I didn't think you were fond of that title. It's growing on me. After some moments of contemplation, Julius steeled himself and made peace with his decisions. I'd be a fool to push you any further. I believe that I've gotten what I wanted, and I hope you have as well. He reached his hand over the table, and Naruto firmly grabbed hold and shook. With that, the deal had been cemented. Still, Naruto caught wind of Julius struggling with something, and a questioning look from the blonde finally gave the monarch courage to speak. Naruto, I wholeheartedly believe in your cause. If I weren't in such a volatile position, I would publicly announce your crusade and join you. But I have a certain standard to uphold, and losing any ground with the nobles would only do more damage than good to what you're trying to accomplish. I'm truly sorry that this is the best help that I can give you. You don't have to apologize. Giving me my own squad was enough to put me in a good place. While it's not technically a full-fledged squad, let's not sweat the details. They both exhaled in amusement at the mild teasing, as Naruto expressed his recognition of Julius's dilemma. In any case, I understand. The image of a leader is nearly as important as the leader himself. If you were to falter in any way, it could cause the civilian population to panic. Honestly, this is the best way you could have handled this, and I thank you for how lenient with the rules you're being. It wasn't something that Naruto was unfamiliar with. He spent much time learning from the memories of the tailed beasts while in his conscious hibernation. Through their eyes he'd seen many empires rise and fall, along with all of their kings and generals, benevolent or cruel, famed or forgotten, just or wicked. Naruto had witnessed them all, and at the present, Julius seemed to be the former in all of those cases. The sovereign nodded approvingly. As expected of a sage. You seem very wise. Naruto waved him off, retrieving his teacup and draining the contents. I just know the basics of how sovereigns should conduct themselves. I'm pretty sure that by the time I was 16 I was being subtly groomed to take the place as my village's commander. Probably would have happened too, had the whole end of the world thing not blown up when it did. Regardless of that fact, you conduct yourself in a very mature manner for somebody who was sealed away since the age of 17. What are you, technically, 4,020 years old now? Give or take? Naruto replied. He really didn't know himself at this point. He definitely hadn't counted the days he was in meditation, but the tailed beasts had been sure to let him know once every few hundred years or so came and went. I know a lot because I've seen a lot. In the first decade and half of my life there wasn't a single day where I didn't have to overcome some type of hardship. Each time I hurdled over a problem, I received some insight into the workings of the world, and each hurdle from there became easier and easier. So you would say those events during adolescence and breaking through those obstacles were what gave you the knowledge to persevere. What is this, therapy? Sorry, Julius answered sheepishly. It's not every day you find yourself talking to an actual living legend. I'm trying to squeeze every bit of information out of you that I can. Thanks for being so subtle about it. Naruto poured himself another cup of tea and blew through the steam to cool it. He raised his eyes from the liquid to Julius and asked a question he'd been wondering since this topic of conversation had started. So what do I tell the other squads when I see them? You know that they'll ask what force I joined, and I can't go around telling the bulls I joined the Dawn, and the Dawn I joined the Lions. Julius alleviated his worries. When you're not on undercover operations, which will be few and far between, I promise you'll tell them that you're under the orders of the Wizard King Julius to help, as he sees fit. I'll provide you written confirmation, and if they have a problem with it, tell them to come and see me. Doesn't that sound awfully suspicious? Naruto justifiably asked. It would be even more suspicious to publicly grant you your own separate squad, the king retorted. I'd call it the Orange Foxes, the sage responded smiling. And what a squad it would be. Both men laughed, as the absurdity of their situation finally settled in. 000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000. Naruto later found himself lodged in one of the many guest bedrooms of the castle, being waited on by maids and butlers alike. He was served a late supper of an unfamiliar pasta and red sauce dish with a glass of some absurdly old wine. Alcohol had not been something he regularly indulged in, but he accepted it graciously, nonetheless. The bed was obnoxiously soft, and though he felt no need to sleep, he enjoyed resting his weary bones all the same. The next day would be his start of squad assignments, starting with the Blue Rose, and working his way arbitrarily through each squad, and then cycling back through, taking every Sunday off for briefings with Julius. At the request of Julius for some sort of an official uniform, Naruto opted for the creation of a plain white cloak outlined in rose red. Emblazoned on the front corner was the symbol of the leaf. It reminded him to embrace the will of fire in all things he would have to do moving forward. On his back was a single large red line, gradually circling in on itself, forming a much thinner and far more archaic form of the Uzumaki whirlpool. It reminded him that though much of his life stayed behind him, it was still a part of who he was, as a person, and would continue to be, as he struggled on in this new world. The cloak had arrived at his room before him, and Naruto was pleased after trying it on in the mirror. It hung lower than those of the official squads, hanging about his waist, and covering most of his torso, save for the opening at his front he could hang over his shoulders at his wish. It reminded him of the cloak he had always dreamed of wearing during his Hokage tenure. Better late than never, I guess, he thought bemused. Julius had also provided him with some other new clothes, in order to give you a more professional look, as well as get you into something you'd feel more familiar with. Naruto admitted that he hadn't been paying particular attention to the quality of his clothes over the past few years, considering they were mainly worn during farm chores or housework. Still, what Julius had so kindly gifted him felt a bit over the top. The leather boots were incredibly comfortable, and had obviously taken much time to inlay with steel toes, and a nice little nest on the inside for him to hide a kunai or two. Regardless, he felt there was no reason for them to reach almost the entire length of his shin to his knees. He couldn't feel any real armor or padding inside, so he assumed it was some weird aesthetic choice that he had never been exposed to before. The pants were some sort of mildly elastic as this denim, Naruto thought. They fit much better than the stiff denim that was rampant in his own day, but how well they currently fit made him slightly uncomfortable. He would have to ask later how Julius and his staff knew his measurements so accurately. The shirt was loose, very loose, and longer than what felt necessary. He was forced to roll up the sleeves to his elbows and tuck the shirt into his pants lazily. Still, there was a far too deep V-neck unwarranted by the climate, may he add, that finally cut off near the middle of his sternum. It wasn't to the point of being inappropriately extreme, but it was still a look that would make Sister Lily blush. While trying to find any sense of his own touch in the look, he opted for a pouch made of burlap hanging from his belt on his right rear, that contained a few of his Thunder God kunai, and a single tan scroll. Inside the scroll was nested dozens of others, each containing food, water, weapons, clothes, or any other provision he may find necessary in his day-to-day life. With it, he was prepared to leave the city for extended missions at a moment's notice. After donning the new attire aside from the cloak, he felt that it fit quite comfortably, and provided a surprising amount of maneuverability. Yet, when staring at the outfit in the mirror, a single, incredibly confusing thought crossed his mind that would stay until he met with Julius again tomorrow. Why in the fuck am I dressed like a pirate? With some experimentation into a few newly developed seals, the morning had come quickly for Naruto. He grabbed himself in his new clothes, and swiftly made his way towards Julius's office, giving the courtesy of a gentle knock at the door, but exercising his authority as a living legend by entering on his own accord anyways. The king himself was at his desk, rifling through the paper bane of every sovereign. When Naruto approached the man, he could spot his name on many of the documents that Julius was signing, and shuffled. Soon Julius looked away from his work and observed Naruto in his new uniform, giving a stiff smile. "You look good. How do they fit?" he asked pleasantly. "They're comfortable, and I can move well," Naruto responded, "but can I ask where you got the design for these?" Julius set his pen down and relaxed into his chair, answering. "The closest non-fiction book we have dating back to your era was recorded about 300 years after the writing of the epic of the Rakuto Sennin. We hadn't thought that the difference in wardrobe would have been that drastic. Do you not like it?" "It's not that I don't like it," Naruto answered. "It's quite comfortable, and I appreciate the effort whoever made this obviously must have put into it. However, 60 years was the difference between the leaf wearing straight-up metal plates, as armor, as opposed to flak jackets. Can I ask the name of this book?" "The Voyage and History of the Pirate Vessel Santa Pinta." Naruto let out a hum of realization. "Ah, so the deckhand look was intentional. Sorry. We can get new ones made by tonight," Julius responded apologetically. The king finally turned back to his paperwork, and started elaborating its contents aloud. I finalized the documents for the creation of your unit, as well as your instruction into our military. I've also had a schedule created for you to balance your training with the squads equally. Naruto whistled, clearly impressed. Damn, all that in one night? He asked awestruck. And Granny always complained about how difficult paperwork is. Julius chuckled at the comment and continued signing documents. I had my assistant take care of the scheduling and most of the creation of the unit. All I had to do was sign off on those. Declaring your military personnel was the easiest part. I always keep a sheet or two handy on my desk, and they're pretty much done with your name and my signature. Ah, so your assistant did all of the work, Naruto surmised. The king looked annoyed at the comments. You know, if I wasn't blinded by my admiration for you, I'd have threatened you by now. Naruto let out a hearty laugh and replied, sure you would, young one. The king stood up from his desk and walked around, motioning for Naruto to follow. Don't forget that, not counting meditation time, you're only 20. Now come on, I'm going to introduce you to the captain of the Blue Rose. You'll be with them for the next 3 days. Naruto turned and followed the man with a fading laugh and joking yes sir, much to Julius's chagrin. The walk lets Naruto see new parts of the city and become acquainted with the environment. They passed food stalls and modernized stores before soon appearing at the gates of the Blue Rose's headquarters. There at the entrance stood the blonde woman he had seen on the balcony yesterday, donning a firm salute and her helmet at her left side. As they approached, Julius waved the woman to ease and began introductions. Naruto, this is the captain of the Blue Rose Knights, Charlotte Roseley. She's been in the Knights for many years now, so please treat her with respect. Charlotte, I'm sure you're already familiar with Naruto Uzumaki. Charlotte let out a stern, it's a pleasure to meet you, and held her hand out which Naruto took in a firm handshake. The sage noticed a slight hesitancy when he grabbed her, but thought nothing of it as they let go of one another. Likewise, he replied. Julius smiled at the two seemingly getting along. Fantastic. Charlotte, Naruto will be assisting in training however you see fit. Naruto, I simply ask that you don't hurt any of our knights. In your hands, they could prove to be rather fragile. With that, Julius sent himself off and left Naruto and Charlotte to enter the training quarters. It proved rather plain in Naruto's eyes. It was a dirt clearing in the corner of the base with targets near one wall and rings outlined with chalk presumably for sparring. It was a large space, but without any people using it, it felt rather empty. Furthermore, Charlotte had been completely silent the entire walkover, and the atmosphere was beginning to become awkward for the social ninja. Thus, he attempted what little he could at starting a conversation. It's a nice training field, he said dryly. The knights are just finishing their breakfast, and will be here soon. Then we can begin our training, the captain curtly replied. Her eyes seemed unnecessarily cold, and her sentences were sharp and rigid. It was almost as if she really didn't want to be around the boy. With that feeling, Naruto went out on a limb and said, I get the feeling that you don't like me very much. Charlotte had no hesitation in her response. Correction. I don't like men. Naruto chuckled at that, deciding to tease her a bit to ease the tension. Well, good for you. I hear it's not easy for those of your preferences around here, but I respect you making a stand. She turned to him coldly, and nearly lost her composure at the remark. She quickly gathered her wits, and shot a sharp response back at him. Imbecile. Your mind is horrifically vile. This is a prime reason as to why I loathe your sex. Naruto feigned a confused expression, and pushed further. Sex? At least allow me to buy a fine lady such as yourself dinner first. I feel it would only be appropriate. With that, Charlotte's body betrayed her, and an embarrassed blush emerged on her cheeks. She grew distraught, and struggled to find a response to such a vulgar comment. No man save Yami had dared to speak in such a forward way with her, and thus she had never properly learned to simply ignore this type of dialogue. Before she could quip back, Naruto interrupted her, satisfied. You see? He smiled. That's the most emotion I've seen from you since I got here. My frustration with you shouldn't make you happy. Charlotte exasperated. The boy shrugged. Better than the glares you were giving me before. The captain grew more irritated at the remark, and quickly began compassing herself, turning away to hide the redness of her cheeks. If you weren't under Julius's protection I would have struck you by now. You know, he said something very similar this morning. Why do you all resort to violence so willfully? So we can strike down ignorant beasts like you. Naruto genuinely laughed at that. He could tell that Charlotte wasn't entirely sure of whether he was joking or not, and judging by her looks and noble status, she must have been one of those girls whose first greetings from many men were marriage proposals. Being uncomfortable around guys she never had proper conversations with was understandable, but it seemed that she took that feeling to a needless level. I was just joking, the boy admitted, but I won't apologize for the teasing. I've sensed some negative emotions from you since we shook hands. It was prejudicial, and I don't believe you've given me a fair chance to even make a good first impression. Those disgusting remarks were your first impression. How would that ever be considered appropriate? Naruto shook his head, still with a grin on his face. My first impression was the awkward handshake and greeting. Everything after that was for my amusement. Again, the handshake didn't feel right, he concluded. Charlotte grew confused at his remark and voiced her opinion, still horrifically annoyed at the blonde's shrewdness. How does a handshake not feel right? I wasn't lying when I said I can sense negative emotions, Naruto indulged. There were some weird vibes coming from you the minute we clasped hands. I'd just like to know why that is, considering we'd never spoken before, and I thought we would get along well. My personal feelings are none of your concern, she replied. They are if we're going to have to fight together someday. Charlotte scoffed. Our relationship will remain strictly professional. Friendship between us is not only unnecessary, but impossible after your previous words. Naruto was glad that she said that. I wouldn't jinx yourself if I were you. I have a reputation of accomplishing what people tell me is impossible. After he spoke, Naruto heard the doors of the barracks break open, and turned to see dozens of knights file out into the training ground. Each wore the blue robe signifying their allegiance to the Rose Squad, and looking through each of the soldiers, Naruto could pick out a pertinent feature shared by each member. They were all women. No men, huh? This lady really takes her dislike of guys to the extreme. Naruto faced back towards Charlotte, and exuded a warm smile. Let's get to training then, shall we? Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. And make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.